Welcome to Talent Without Pretense. I'm Gerald Gordon, co-founder of Reference Me. I spent years watching companies make very expensive, very preventable mistakes around how they hire and how they let people go. This show is where I sit down with HR leaders, CHROs, people executives who are actually in the room when those decisions get made. No buzzwords, no vendor pitches, just honest conversation about what's working, what's broken, and what needs to change. Now let's get into it. Alex Walker spent years building talent and performance programs inside Wells Fargo before she went out on her own with a leadership experience, coaching leaders through moments that never show up on the org chart. A lot of those moments come down to one thing, whether people actually understood each other when it mattered most. Alex, welcome. And
Thanks so
while
much.
I can share some information that we know about you, I always know that the person that talks about what they do knows way more than what I do. And I've had the pleasure of having some conversations with you prior to our podcast. So I'd love for you to tell our audience a little bit about what you do and who you are.
So thanks. Thanks for even asking. And I'll tell you, there's a gift in hearing back your words, right? So we're all learning something. So this talent development isn't just for the others. It just isn't for clients. Like, we're doing our own work here. And so it's great to hear words back. So yeah, I work with leadership development. That's kind of the domain. And I like to say that I'm playing in that big gap between everything you know and that which you need to know. Things are changing quickly. The skills you had don't meet the things you need to do. So how do we bridge that? How do you get that information? What else can I tell you?
Maybe a little bit about how you came out, like what was the roles that you've had and how you came to be Alex in this space.
You know, it's a long, very lucky journey. I say to folks, don't take your career development tips from me. So I fell into group work when I was in college as part of being a resident assistant. I had no idea it was a way to pay bills. It was, it was a means to an end, but it was training, development, putting on programs, working directly with students. Went and got a master's in human resources development right after. And I never got out of it. It was too fun. It was active. I did a lot of experiential education, working with people and helping them do their work, really, because it's really their own work. And it took me I've been on manufacturing floors. I can say schools and colleges because of that early housing work. And I spent 20 years at Wells Fargo, similarly building a career where I just kept making it through the rounds of either layoffs or reorgs. And so moved from an individual line of business, working in talent there, all the way up to enterprise, where I started working with a team that addressed the needs of 40,000 managers in this global space. So it was a fantastic ride, learning tons from how to influence, right? One person in coaching or 10 and 20 in a classroom, serve the needs of 40,000 in a context of this, regulated industry. And then after that, I thought, I think there's something to be done out on my own. So I went from, a team of 250,000 team members at Wells Fargo to a leadership experience.
Is an absolute amazing journey and operating at scale. It must be quite a shock from going from scale down to individuals, but we can get into that.
So good.
So when you look at your company, a leadership experience, and what does that look like day to day for you? And then also, who are the people that call you or who do you call as you are growing this side of the business, getting away from the larger scale corporations and actually working with the smaller groups? Or are you still working with the larger organizations, but just doing it as part of a leadership experience?
So it varies. So part of that, my kind of story was I set out and I was going to do coaching. I was going to do one-on-one coaching, and that's what I was going to do. And again, just accepting work that came my way, I ended up 4.5 years in. Primarily what I do, or a large part of my work, comes from delivering against large strategies in billion-dollar companies. So They want to take their top leadership and make sure that they understand how to lead through change, or, whatever their business imperative is, how do they get the people to do it? And so I joined teams to deliver on that. So that flavor of Wells Fargo, of the large, the scale, has followed me actually, and it is a great space to play in. What is growing, so that's kind of established, and what's growing is turning my attention into two areas where there's maybe not quite the same size business, but the same issues. How do you lead through change? How do you get through complexity? How do you make a decision when you don't have all the information and you need the decision yesterday? How do we do that as humans? So, offering services when I'm called in on that level. And then I'm dabbling in a new exciting thing to say, hey, here's some on demand stuff. You don't need me to, I can create it, but for many more people who are not in those $1 billion, top 20, top 500, or about 300 level, how do you get information? How do you answer those same grappling questions? So I'm playing around with scale, to your point of, I could find myself in a week delivering in Thousand Oaks, California, and I'm just before our call was working on the script for how to have a meeting that's not excruciating. How do we do that?
You see, what I want our listeners to know is that when you are in senior leadership, it's all about smoothing and sharpening at the same time. And what you find is that most leaders, especially those who are at the top of their game, they're either being coached, being trained, and they're actually delivering an execution. And it's an interesting feedback loop. You get coached, you start implementing the things, and then you start making those changes, and that's how you actually grow as a leader. So Alex is one of those who are in the room with executives and helping them understand what their strengths are, sharpening those things, and then they're coming back over and over again to actually improve on themselves. This is a game changer, and I am just so excited about learning a little bit more about how you work with these leaders. So, if you can pull a little bit of the curtain back, let's walk into the room with you, and you got 40 eyeballs looking at you. All of them are senior leaders. They've given you the floor. They probably have some skepticism, but they know that they need to take this training. What happens when you walk in the room, and what are some of the things that you start them off with?
So style wise, and it's almost a non-negotiable. So I'm going to say style, but for me, it's a non-negotiable. Building trust and psychological safety on the get go. The first email, the greeting him at the door. So if it's a training per se, and I did some work recently, people want to go and they don't want to go. Like they've been chosen, it's great, but it's 4 days. Like it's this tension between how to work on yourself, but you're still trying to deliver back at the office. And so acknowledging what it takes for people to get there is huge. So that's some kind of philosophical approach. I do believe that people have far more knowledge than they know. So they think, they're going to come in and I'm the expert, right? Like sit down and they get the pencil and they get ready. And they walked in with a tremendous amount of knowledge and information to give each other, to harness and maybe sharpen. Maybe they knew more than they thought they did. So holding up, a lot of my work is about kind of holding up a mirror. Even if a question's asked, what a great question to hold and to grapple with. That in itself is a leadership skill.
Mm.
So yes, an expert and coming in with information, but the vehicle really is through relationship and through what the group already knows to pull out what's in there and then provide a model, provide a tip, provide direction. Certainly, but there's greatness in every seat in that room, I believe.
Now, the more I think about what you said, the more it makes sense, right? So you're not going to be greater than the whole.
Mm.
So as people get together, especially if you're able to curate the right people in the room, we always say having the right people on the bus, then there's going to be a magical thing that happens, especially if everybody is open and there's a way to share free forming information. They can actually really build and learn something in those 4 days about how they are actually growing. And so I do get that. I get the fact that, yes, they have an expectation when they come in the room, but they may not realize that they are a big part of what happens in the room.
Right.
as you are curating these lessons. So I love that. Now, prior to us talking today, we had an interesting conversation when it came to AI. And so AI is changing how a lot of teams are working, how people talk to each other while they do it. From where you sit, what does it actually look like when leaders have to bring out their best, build real communication skills, and not just do it because we're trying to get faster tools? I remember in one of our discussions, we were just talking about how the inference on communication is critical, but yet most people misunderstand it. They
Yeah.
look at it from, I'm just sharing what I need to share, without really receiving what that person is saying and testing that they really understand what's being said. Whereas if we're dealing with AI, we don't get those cues back. We just say what we need to say. And whether the thing understands or not, it may drive a different outcome. And then we also talked about when the system is responding in a way that we don't like it to respond, we're learning how to communicate with the system so that it gives us the responses that we want. So it's essentially, instead of us training it, it's training us. So I thought that that was a pretty interesting conversation. But
Yeah.
getting back to the AI piece, what do you see relative to communication and miscommunication, and how does AI play into all of that from your perspective?
Hmm. So many places to take this. So I believe that human to human communication is a foundational need we need to get right. Even someone who teaches it can miss it, And so I talk a lot about being on autopilot and how much can get missed because we're on autopilot. We're just not paying attention. The presence of AI, one, is a huge topic that is we're conversing about. How do we handle it? What do we do with it? When does it play? What's it mean in our regulated industry? Which ones can we use? When can we use them? Under which domain can I get, all of so many conversations are surfacing where that's a related topic. And it's demanding that we talk efficiently and effectively with one another to solve the problems. So it's a couple of different places. One, it's the topic. It's a ubiquitous topic. Two, there's, I think, a love affair. We were talking about it yesterday. We want it to solve the problems. We want it to come in, but it can't replace the human conversation needed to do origin of work.
Mhm. But how do we misunderstand each other? So if it's gonna be human to human, human to human, is it gonna be us talking to people? How does that misunderstanding show up? And even if we don't include technology, as you mentioned, the foundation of people talking to people has gotta be step number one. So what are some of the ways that we misunderstand each other when we're communicating with each other?
You always. Shall we talk about yesterday's?
Yeah. Yes.
So we had a meeting we were going to have, and I made assumptions, and I looked at my calendar, and the assumption I made is that I had all the details. I didn't have all the details. I didn't check. I went to come into the meeting, and it was just my own placeholder. So it was just, it was a perfect snicker, right?
Yeah.
Two professionals intending to meet together, wanting to hold the conversation. And so what plays into that little example? Assumptions that I had the information, assumption that you had the email, my accurate email. And that's when we liked and respected each other. Imagine what can it get at play, it can come into play when there's some kind of hesitation, when psychological safety isn't present, what can get in the way. So there's ample reasons communication can break down. What I've been playing with for the last 4 years is a methodology that hones and sharpens my attention on a couple of specific behaviors. So I'm thinking of how do we fix that then? There's two that we were talking about yesterday: summarize and testing understanding. Those two are, so I track 18 behaviors. And they show up in conversations, and we've got some data on how prevalent they show up. And they, is, you may not be surprised, under 3%.
Wow.
Under 3% of the time of the behaviors that we use in a conversation, problem solving, critical thinking, do we test our understanding and summarize what was said. Now, isn't that fascinating?
Mm.
Where giving information happens at like over 40%. I'm doing a lot right now. You can say some of it's context, which is great. and some of it's colorful story that may not have the same value.
Mm,
So I've been playing with discrete behaviors with groups. Like I watch them in groups, but I've been the beneficiary of saying, so look at yesterday. I could have tested some understanding
and then yeah.
prior to the moment of need to say, hey, what should I be expecting? Or, like ask some questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Like we both had the assumption that everybody had all the information. I had the wrong email, so you never got my information, but then you had something on your calendar knowing that you were going to meet with me, but I never knew. And
In the
then
middle part, we didn't have an overlap.
yeah, we had this strange overlap, which actually brings me into my next question. So I was sharing with you the book from Malcolm Gladwell, which you're familiar with the author as well. And it says, talking to strangers. And we really don't know how to talk to strangers. And on top of that, we're pretty bad at reading people. So if you don't say what you really mean and you just assume what they mean, you can run into a lot of challenges, point taken, of what we just discussed. So, when it comes to reading the cues and testing understanding, what are some of the techniques that we as leaders can do to ensure that communication is flowing and people are understanding each other?
One of the biggest ways I think is build in the process into the conversation. So if you're not doing it on autopilot, then be sure that X number of times, 2, 3, you stop and say, okay, let's stop for a second. Where have we gotten so far? What have we agreed? What are the questions on the table? How many times have you been in a really meaty conversation and it's gone off on an interesting path, but someone lifts their head up and to say, wait a second, do we want to be spending our time on that part, or do we table that and get back to the agenda item? So that overt check. These are all behaviors. So asking those questions of reacting to, is this what we want to be doing? Process, proposing a process. Let's stop for 5 minutes and reflect on where we are so far. So building in processes overtly until they're habit, I think can be huge. We know when, like, we can laugh, we can snicker, and we can have the mistake of yesterday. Like, it happens in meetings when we're talking with one another, overtly planning to check in. Or I've said a lot. Tell me what you're hearing me say, and then the reader or you hear that and you go, oh, that wasn't what I meant to say at all.
Right.
You really took that in a different angle. Let's try to get on the same page. So overtly testing, seeking the understanding.
Yeah, in engineering, we would say like parrot, right? We're speaking into a particular subject, and then we want you to feedback to us what was said. Or we say rubber duck, where we're just trying different things out, and we're trying to see how that information is flowing back to us, or is it actually behaving the way that we thought it would behave? So we use those terms a lot.
Wait. You like someone calls rubber duck, or this is a rubber duck moment? Like, how do
It's
you
like a rubber duck moment, yeah. You're like, I need you to just be a sounding board and tell me what this sounds like, or I'm about to do something or try something and give me some indication of what's your first reaction and things like that. So
and think about how powerful that is. That tells the recipient exactly how to listen in. Like how powerful is that? If I don't tell you it's a rubber duck moment and I'm all over and it's half baked and if you are expecting it to be set and solid,
in concrete,
what a big disconnect that would be.
yeah,
But if I tell you how to listen to me and how to engage, then now we have it's like a mini contract. Like, oh, I understand what that is. It's supposed to be messy, and I can bring in ideas, and I know what my role is. That's a huge technique. I'd say it's a powerful technique that tells everybody how to operate in that mini conversation.
yeah. So I tend to do that with people I work with as well. So when I either get to a new team or have a new team, the first thing I do is I say, here's how I like to be communicated to. Here is how I communicate. Like sometimes I could be very direct. Just understand that I'm not doing that from a personal perspective is I may have 50,000 things going on at the same time and this is how it comes out. I let them know that I'm a people first type of leader. So I have these rules that I always share with my team about how I interact and what I expect for the people I work with. It has been very successful and people have appreciated that coming from their leader. It's almost like giving them a one pager on me and how I operate.
Think about that. That's pretty astute. Organizations do it, right? Visions and values, how we operate, how we're going to be with one another. Organizations have that. Teams have that. Team contract. What's okay to be on the team. Individuals have that, all the way down to the rubber duck moment. Like, a conversation can have that, and that structure helps all involved know how to play. That's
Hmm.
pretty cool. I've
Oh,
never thought of
I
it in that layered way before.
Yeah, it's just something that I learned from mentors and people that I
Yeah.
operated in. It was important to us.
Mhm.
Yesterday we had an interesting conversation. We said, so summarizing and testing thinking and all of that stuff can be done by AI. And while it can be done by AI, I did ask the question is it still better to do that human to human? And you said absolutely better to do it human to human, even if you have AI that can do the summarization and you're in the meeting and it takes the notes. It's still even better to have a human to human communication. Now, I obviously think I know what that is, but I'm going to use this testing understanding and have you tell us why would it make more sense that the individuals in the room are doing the summarizing? They could allow AI to summarize as well, but there's something magical that happens when you are testing understanding. Can you give us a view of why human to human is still really important, even though we have computers now that can do summarizations for us?
Yeah. I believe the if we've come into a meeting to think together. So that's the important piece. Like if we are working on a problem together, then the summarizing is one of the critical things we need to do to think together. Otherwise, we have, what did I say in one of our reports? Serial giving information. Like we just kind of pile in, right? A group of individuals give their information, but we haven't thought with the information. We haven't played with it and molded it around. And it's in that messy space that thinking together, collaboration, problem solving, team cohesion, it's in that messy space that those things happen. So while you could read later a summary of a meeting, the act of summarizing discrete thoughts, points in a conversation, testing your understanding, even disagreeing, taking a second to say, oh, wait a second, if that part happens, then it really impacts this part. We need to think about that. Or I don't agree with that impact. Like that messy middle is the thinking together. So
Mhm.
it's not a finalized summary. It's the act of problem solving. It's the act of connecting. So I
And
said
it's
a
what
lot. What do you hear in that?
Yeah, right. So I hear many things, right? I hear that there is a huge differentiator through teams that actually solve together and think together versus other teams who just use the outputs verbatim. There's not much
They're
communication,
updates. Whoop,
just
you could have read that.
right. So I'm seeing that, and the camaraderie that we're trying to build with our teams is that they are able to showcase their brilliance through those messy conversations. When it's not the messy conversations, probably doesn't need to be a meeting. Just send me an email with the results. But if you need to carry on the experiences that I have, and you need to tap into the things that I've seen in the past and take that information and make it more relative to the situation that I'm dealing with today, well, that takes group thinking. That's not just going to be me reading something and another person's reading something and we're not having any communication. So that's what jumped into my mind when you said that.
It's somewhat related, but I think it was so important. Yesterday we were talking. So let's say we have that conversation and we grapple together, testing, understanding, disagreeing, synthesizing. Building is another big one where I take part of what you said and add a new piece to it and a whole new entity comes into fruition. Like that's true collaboration.
So we can actually measure that, right?
Yeah, with
Well, we
these
don't.
behaviors.
We can measure it, but in a lot of maybe you are measuring it, but in a lot of places we don't seem to value that, right? So as an engineer, one of the things that I always loved was somebody starting something, not quite sure how they wanted to finish it, and then seeing how that thing, which had nothing to do with what I was doing, all of a sudden become relevant
Mm.
because the idea essentially was ahead of its time. We haven't caught up to it yet. So then all of a sudden the problem shows up and we go, we built something like this 3 weeks, 3 years ago. Let's bring it back out, bring back the assumptions that were made, and let's see if we can take whatever that thing was and mold it into our new. It's the way that I innovate. I've been innovating for a long time, and I've been able to see all these little tools that I was gathering over time. And then when a problem that actually meets the need of those things, to see them come back and be implemented together. It's kind of like there's a in Japan, there's this notion where you have a beautiful vase that's built, but then they purposely break the vase and then they rebuild the vase, but they line it with gold. And the reason why they do that is they're saying that it's more beautiful when it actually comes back together than when it was originally formed. It's like, huh. So that reminds me of what you're talking about.
What a great metaphor for how a conversation happens. It could be a pretty vase by itself, perfect as it was, not tested, not as strong. But once it falls apart and comes back together anew, that's the beauty and the brilliance. Yep.
Yeah. So absolutely love that. So
Mhm.
my company focuses on a very hard conversation. This is when, no matter the way we look at it, companies need to make money and they may have to actually cut a department or lay people off. And so, to look at it from that perspective, a lot of companies, they would just send those departing employees off to a portal or a video library, a chatbot even. And then they say, okay, that's, we check the box. What would be your thought in companies that do things like that? And is there a better way that they should
Mm.
be treating those employees when they have to make that change? And I'm tapping into your section where you work with thousands of executives, right? And you know that that's the heartache, having to let somebody go. But the way that it's done, how do you think that impacts the company and the individuals when that happens poorly?
So I'm going to speak as Alex. This is an Alexism because I've lived it. I was laid off years ago, not at Wells. So I haven't lived through like a layoff like that of recent, but having been around and near. So two things on the receiving end and what I know about the expense of, but I also don't know the other side of the business. So I want to acknowledge what I don't know. The Alexism is we spend so much in acquiring, training, retaining, even the lowest level, dollar level of employee, to let that resource go out the door in mass, it surprises me.
Mm,
That surprises me. I understand it to be a mathematical, got to draw the line and that group goes.
mhm,
But you, as an organization, have invested in so much. Is there another option to, if desired by the employee, to retrain, retool, provide other opportunities? Like if we looked at it as a better, healthier system,
mm.
not one person, one role, you're out. Like that discrete compartmentalization. So again, I understand there's people who do this, on scale and in details I don't have, but I do go, gosh, but we do, but you invested so much.
Yeah. You spend time growing a number of people, and I know they do it at the department level, they do it at the individual level. If you had to coach your leaders, and let's say it was inevitable that they have to do the reductions, what would be some of the things that you would be trying to help them understand as they go through that process? Because the survivors hurt, the person delivering it hurts, the company hurts, the individual who gets laid off hurts. All of it is painful on both ends. And so, okay, you have a leader in front of you. They're telling you, we know this is coming and now we have to execute this.
Yep.
What would be your advice and how would you help them through that? Because communication in this space
So good. But I
is
need a
critical.
little bit more detail to say what is that individual leader grappling with? Is it delivering the hard message? Is it their perception of what they're causing harm to someone? Like what would be their need to connect with that to
Okay.
understand?
Now I'm an engineer, so I'm gonna give it to you both sides, right?
Nice.
The first thing that the HR person is probably thinking is, if it's happening to them, it could happen to me. So they're very concerned in general. And then the second thing is they've been given a list
Sure.
and the managers made the first conversation, but they have to be there for the second conversation to say, okay, this is actually happening. Here are the things that you need, the exit conversation. And they want to get information from them. But at the end of the day, they have to execute it and they got the list. So on one end, I'm in the middle, like, I don't know if this is going to happen to me, but I got to still deliver the news. And then the manager on the other end is it's wondering, okay, how do I communicate this when I'm feeling this pain as well?
So options include, because it's such a human and personal thing. So more philosophically, remember the humans in the whole system. Allow for self to be upset and worried, right? No one, I had an HR leader tell me one time, here's how you can tell if you'll be employed forever. Put your finger in a glass of water and pull it out. Was there still a divot? You're safe. If it filled in, it's we don't know. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so funny. So it could happen. And to deny that, to pretend it's not there, is actually can be detrimental.
Mm,
And keep it in its place. So if someone is upset in front of you because you have delivered the very hard news and you go and they're compelled to say, you think you have problems, I got to do this 52 more times. Okay, no, right? Like it has to be felt and positioned in, is it the right time and place? Does that
mm,
make sense? So pulling it apart and compartmentalizing it in some way.
okay.
Keeping messaging clear and factual is where I might start. Are there resources? Offer them up.
Mm,
Is there, but not robotic, if that makes sense, to zoom through the talking points that I know folks
mm,
are provided are there for guidance and for legal, and there are humans here.
right.
How to create that space for the humanness to show up? Is it long pauses?
Mm.
Is it not too long of a pause to allow processing, but then also forward momentum into the conversation?
Conversation. Yeah. I mean, I could see how this would help us, right? We understand that it's a challenge for us too, but at that moment may not be the best time to communicate the challenges you're personally having to deliver the news. And I love that, right? I love being able to share that with everyone here that yes, everybody is going through things, but you can't pile on what you're going through as some sort of you should, you should feel for me because it's hard for me to deliver this news. I think
Right.
a lot of leaders say that first, like this hurts me just as much. And you're like, no, it's not the same. Like I am going to be out of a job. So it's not affecting you the same way yet. So I don't think that that's a good way to broach the conversation. So thank you for that. I think that that's important.
But hearing my words back make me think, but it doesn't disappear. So find your safety net. Find the coach
Mhm,
that can help you through that. Find the therapist that can help you process it. Find talk with someone at home that's entrusted. Like that doesn't go anywhere. That needs to be cared for as well, so
mhm.
that you can do your other work. So it's not about ignoring it, but it's about finding the right space for it.
Right, because on both sides, there is man, on all sides, there's casualties,
Mm.
and so every aspect needs to be considered, and I love that, right? The person who's actually delivering this, there's a toll that's happening on you. You need to have people you're talking to and guidance as you go through it. Don't go it alone thinking that you are strong enough to go through it because it will come back.
Right. And you're
And,
not the first.
yeah, and
You're not the frontier person.
yeah.
Like resources exist.
Yeah, so we need to make sure that you're tapping into those resources. Now, you all may not know this, but I've learned this about Alex, but Alex, you helped build a support line for 40,000 managers during COVID. Oof. What was that like? What was the calls like? What was the gap that you seen? Like, I'm gonna say, one, it's a privilege to be called to do something where we had an existential threat. We had no idea what the end result of this was gonna be. We only knew that we had to band together to do the right thing. But you were on the front lines supporting these managers. So I'd love to get your perspective of what was that like for you? What was it like for the leaders? What were you trying to help them understand as they were just supporting this monumental change in humanity.
It was really a wild time. I believe everybody can say that because all that was happening while my third grader was sitting over here trying to get, trying to do, we were all balancing a lot. And I had an advantage. I had been remote, I don't know, 11 years, 8 years prior. So being remote wasn't a new thing for me. The new problem of was, and so I was approached, hey, can you help design a resource, a way to provide bank managers with resources? You have no budget. You have no, you can't use video. I got a long list of things I couldn't do, but we need to get them information. And things were changing minute to minute. Like in the early days, if you remember, yeah, yes, you can be at work. No, you can't be at work. The amount of details were changing truly daily. So it wasn't fancy. It was a call line. It was a conference line that people could dial into. We had on staff, or, we got volunteers from our employee relations who knew our online resources and where things were located. We had always had a manager, people manager present to ask those targeted questions to. And then we had a man by the name of Dean. It ended up being the voice of calm for everyone.
Mhm.
Remember, it's humans. It was humans struggling. Fear that they didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
Uncertain, they were trying to keep banks open, just chaos. So the human part of it was a lifeline that they could call, someone who could get information. And we ended up, we would, at first we met 2 times a week
Hmm.
to answer all of the calls. And so we would answer, if we couldn't answer it then, we would answer it in the next call. Ended up being a source of information and calm for folks to orchestrate that. It was quite an honor. And we had people calling in who represented full teams, like, hey, I'm here for the such and such a region. Like they would take it back to their group. And my big personal compliment came from Dean, who was coming towards the end of a very long, tenured career, excellent at leading his own teams, full departments. And he said, I'm, he's something like, I'm a little sorry I'm retiring. I would have worked for you, no problem. Like that would, like he was like, I was like, oh my God, because he was such a tenured leader, right?
Yeah, but he
Tenured
was
and
recognizing what you've done and how you helped in this very trying time. Like I remember not being able to visit loved ones. I
oh,
remember people falling away. I remember the terror on the elderly. I remember all of these things. And so I just want to thank you and the organization for doing that. One of these wonderful things that I get to do talking to great people like you is when they've actually have been a part of saving humanity, want to be able to give them their flowers and let them know that we are here because of the wonderful work that you all have done. So definitely want to thank you for that.
well, it wasn't the front lines of like the medical folk, but we were trying to keep the lights on and people calm and making one
Yeah.
decision after the other. And it was a full team. So while I kind of pulled things together, and it's so hard to say who, yeah, it was a full team effort going
Mhm.
through all
And you
that.
see how important that communication was.
Yeah.
And it was a critical time for people to show their humanity.
Hmm.
And in a lot of ways, we didn't see that, but in some of the ways we have. And I just think that that's amazing. So, Alex, I want to thank you for being a genuine, honest way of looking on the inside of communication, the inside of what it's like to tackle miscommunication, giving us tools on how we can actually test for understanding. And then we need to hear more about those 18 or 19 markers that you measure, but a
Yes.
true understanding of why communication is critical, not just on the surface of what's being said, but more about what it looks like when it's implemented and how people can receive it. And I just think that this was a masterclass in that, using real examples, especially between our miscommunication earlier.
So funny, right?
I think that's
I
hilarious,
teach this. I'm above any mistake.
right? And so I love that, you were able to bring that to the podcast. If anybody would like to reach out to Alex, you can find her information in the show notes. And again, I just want to thank you so very much for joining us.
It
Now,
has
if you're
been my pleasure.
Thank you. And if you're looking for me, my name is Gerald Gordon. The company that I run is called Reference Me. And what we do is we help companies when they have to make these workforce transitions. So if you're interested in learning more, just go to referenceme.ai. And Alex, do you have a way that people can reach out to you?
I am out on LinkedIn, might be the best way. Alexandra Miller Walker out on LinkedIn.
All right.
And when we post this, we have a way for folks to come and get some play with the 18 behaviors and just see what, build
Okay.
those skills. Complementary because the world needs better communication.
That's fantastic. All right. So thank you all. Have a great remainder of your day.